Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Brian from Gundam TCG, and over the weekend we just had our first ever Melbourne Regional here for Gundam, and I managed to make top 8 in this regional. I came 6th after Swiss, and I just wanted to make a video showcasing the deck that I decided to play, and yeah, I just wanted to share with you guys how the event went, what went into picking the deck I decided to play, and how I felt overall with the deck choices and the cards that I decided to play for the event. As you guys can see here, I have some of the prizing that I managed to win. So, of course, we got some participation packs that I have already opened here. And more importantly, we managed to get the top 8 Hero Yui. Let's see if the camera can kind of catch the beauty of this card. Oh, the focus is not quite there, but it is a beautiful card. I do like the card a lot more in person than I do with the picture online, I'll say that much. But today I have for you guys my deck profile. I decided to take to the event Red, White, Justice, Sinanju. I just really wanted to play a deck that I really enjoyed. I didn't want to think too much about what would be considered the best deck for the event, because sometimes the best deck for me isn't the strongest one in the room, and perhaps not the deck that I think is the best to play to win. I just wanted to have a good time, and this deck played a lot of the cards that I really liked, and I'll talk about that throughout the video as well. But just before I go into the deck profile, I do want to give a quick shout out to Evil Chris. He came 2nd at the Bristol Regional a few weeks ago, and that was kind of the result that I saw and was interested in this deck in the first place. I didn't even know that this concept existed, so if my deck does look a little bit similar, I just really agreed with his ratios, and yeah, I love the playstyle of the deck. So if you guys do see some similarities in the deck lists, it's because of him. And yeah, let's just start off by introducing kind of the main reason I wanted to take this deck in the first place, and that is these two cards here, Sinanju and Justice Gundam. Both of these are really strong mid to late game units. Sinanju just being a menace with high maneuver if he is paired, and being able to do 2 damage to anything unrestricted as long as he destroys something in the shield area, makes it a complete menace to play against, and I really like the card a lot. Similarly for Justice, it's a bit of a combination between the unit itself and also the pilot that he pairs with, Atherin. So I'll talk a little bit more about the cards, but I really like the options that this card gave and the tempo that it provided throughout the matches. Overall, I had a lot of fun. I really prioritized trying to play it my own style. So if you guys look at this profile and see the cards are in weird ratios, chances are I didn't have that strong of a logic going into the tournament as to why I played them. There's probably a little bit of logic, but for the most part, I just really wanted to play certain cards at different ratios in a way that I enjoyed. For those who want to see the deck list, I'll have it on the screen here, so you guys can have a pause and have a look. And for the rest of this, I guess, section, I'm going to be talking about the ratios and why I really wanted to play the cards in the numbers that there were. So just to start off, we have the blocker package. This is probably one of the biggest reasons why I really wanted to play white in general. If I wasn't going to play this red-white deck, I was either going to play another white version, because I really think that the blockers are very strong into a metagame that can be either fast or slow. These blockers will slow down the game when you're playing against aggro, and against the slower matchups, they protect your main boss monsters. In this case, we're playing Sinanju and Justice, having these early game blockers established, and if your opponent can't get rid of them, it's really hard for them to push through to get rid of those units. So I guess the main thing to talk about is why there isn't any Zawart. I didn't play Zawart because honestly, he didn't fit the way that I like to play, because he can't attack the player. For me, naturally, I like to be able to have the option to attack my opponent, and Zawart doesn't really work that way. He's very much more of a defensive tool as opposed to an aggressive one, and I wanted the ability to play aggressive as well, so Zawart is not in my deck list for that reason. I definitely wanted to play 4 Lifrus and 4 Rick Diaz's. We just need more blockers in the early game, so then if we do get told to go first, at least on our turn 3, we have like almost certain way to get a blocker down, and going second, consistently getting a blocker on turn 2 is really nice. As for the striker packs, this one I saw a lot of people playing at either 3 or 4. I chose to go for 3 because I didn't want to mess around with having a striker pack on the field and then bursting one out of life and feeling bad about it. That's honestly the main reason why I didn't play 4. But oftentimes, if you draw multiples of this, you want to try to play aggressive with it. I like to play the 4-2 blocker a lot, actually, to try to force my opponent to respond to my board. And as long as they're attacking my board, I don't really mind, because my deck plays really well into the late game. So yeah, I think that these numbers of the blockers worked really well for me. Next up, I want to talk about the first pilot unit pairing that I have. I'm playing 4 copies of the L-Strike Gundam and 4 copies of Kira. I think that this card is an amazing card. It has a really strong stat line at 4/4. It plays on turn 5. It has a really strong link in the form of Kira, and Kira is just a fantastic pilot in general. Not to mention that this unit can also just bounce anything. In a meta game that has a lot of tokens, there's a lot of striker packs, there's a lot of Corsica bases. If you're playing against Rush, there's just a bunch of random tokens flying around. Even now, I think a lot of people are playing Justice in general, so getting rid of the Justice token is extremely relevant. So I really wanted to play max copies of L-Strike. As for Kira, it's a bit strange because these are the only link units that I'm playing for Kira, but I think that the pilot is just so strong. Even though he only pairs directly with the L-Strike, there are a lot of situations where you will have a Lifrith or a Rick Diaz on your board, and your opponent will just have a lot of units that they're trying to play aggressive with. Being able to see this card early, and if you have multiples of him, even better, you'll be able to just pair them onto any of your existing blockers, and these are menaces in their own right. They're still blockers, and if they have weak units, for example, if you're playing into aggro, if your opponent plays a 2/2 unit, you can swing into it for free. And if your opponent doesn't address this Rick Diaz or this Lifrith with a Kira underneath it, they're going to be in a bit of a weird situation where their units are going to die kind of for free, and the only way they can trade into these units is to use their own link unit, and you're okay with that. It's especially obnoxious if it's a Rick Diaz in that situation because the Gundam won't kill it for free. Whereas for Lifrith, it's not as strong because it'll be only 4 attack. But overall, I really enjoyed it. Every time that I saw Kira, I felt like I had a very smooth time trying to navigate through the board state. And obviously, Kira L-Strike, classic combo to clear board, bounce a unit, and the blocker is relatively healthy. Next up, we have our other pilot and unit combination. We have, of course, Justice Gundam, one of the best cards, in my opinion, in white. I love this card. Being able to play him and always get a blocker, 2 bodies, and randomly being able to attack with the blocker on the turn that you play it as well is often relevant when you're trying to either clear board or you're trying to go for game. It's just an amazing tempo swing, and the blocker, it kind of adds up. If you play multiple Justices, it's very annoying for your opponent to deal with 2 bodies that fly out in one turn. And of course, the pilot that pairs with him, Atherin. This card is definitely one of the main reasons why I wanted to play red-white. Atherin allowing you to attack into any standing level 5 unit or lower gives you a lot of opportunities to take board in the way that you want to. When I pair it with the Justice, or when I pair it with the other link unit that I play, Aegis Gundam, it allows you to have so many options inside your attacking phase and just being able to clear the board however way you want. Atherin with Justice is usually used, in my opinion, to clear out bodies that are blockers. That was the main use of it. I played a lot of white decks in my games today, and I'll share my matchups later in the video. Really liked being able to force my opponent to make a decision on how they wanted to defend their blockers. And at the end of the day, with the Justice and Atherin together, your opponent is never trading favorably. As for the Aegis Gundam, this card was something that I didn't really have on my radar to start with in the first place. This was definitely because of Evil Chris's list. When I saw this, I didn't understand how it really functioned in the deck because it is a really weird stat line. If you don't play it with an Atherin or with any pilot, it just dies to 8-cost swing, but that's not what this card is made for. This card is a late game card disguised as a mid game card. Against the aggro matchups, you can play it with the Atherin early to remove threats on the board. That is perfectly fine. But whenever I see my opponent playing white against me, this is a late game card because if you are able to park this and then later on put a pilot on him, maybe an Atherin, or maybe even use the base Vesalius, this thing will do so much damage to pretty much any unit for free. For every white deck, all the late game units will be very, very susceptible to Aegis Gundam. And if they are forced to attack into this, you are so happy because it's a relatively cheap unit, but if they don't respond to it, they will take so much damage and there's nothing that they can really do for it. So I really enjoyed this card. Has some decent early game potential against aggro to remove standing units, but in the late game, it's an absolute menace of a card. Just keep in mind, this is a late game card into the white matchups. It is an early game card only against aggro. That's my general advice for Aegis Gundam. And last but not least, the final pilot pairing with a unit. I play 4 copies of Sinanju and 2 copies of Full Frontal. Now, Sinanju was definitely one of the main reasons why I wanted to play red. I think that this card is so fun to play with. Having high maneuver, look, high maneuver is a mechanic that is really unfair. Just being able to attack wherever you want and your opponent cannot respond to it for the most part is really strong. In a grind game situation, your opponent might try to wall up and they can't do anything about the Sinanju. And just being able to consistently remove their shields, especially if it's paired with anything, and if you're able to consistently attack with the Sinanju and then protect him, he will do so much work. That is why we play so many of the blockers, of course. That's why you don't mind trying to put down 2 or 3 blockers before you even get to Sinanju. Because a Sinanju hiding behind a Lifrith and a Rick Diaz, it is extremely annoying for your opponent to deal with. The only real way that you can get rid of a Sinanju behind a wall like this is to play your own Sinanju and then high maneuver it, which is actually something that happened in one of my mirror matches. My opponent actually parked their Sinanju first and hit me, and I was forced to respond with the Sinanju with my own full frontal to get rid of it, because otherwise it was just going to keep hitting me and there was nothing I could do about it. As for the pilot ratios, I only play 2 full frontal because I didn't want to play 11 pilots. As much as I like Rush on the Sinanju, it wasn't that relevant a lot of the times. You're usually okay just parking it and then working with it later on. And if your opponent cannot respond to it, especially if they're not playing blue, this card is going to do a lot of work and your opponent has to respect it. Just a nice thing as well, before I move off of talking about this, Full Frontal also has a lot of nice uses, especially when you're playing with the L Strike. So one of the nice things about Full Frontal's stat line is that it's +2/+2, giving L Strike 6/6. Meaning that your opponent can't use Amuro to rest him in the late game. So it's a good thing to keep in mind. So that's all of the units in the deck. Let's move on to the commands here. And this is part of the reason why I didn't play Zawart. Going first with this deck is sometimes a little bit rough because you saw a lot of my units are level 3 and beyond. So to compensate for it, I play 4 copies of Close Combat. So if you are forced to go first, this is usually a card I actually mulligan for if I know I'm going first. Just so then, if I happen to play against Rush, I'll be able to defend myself for the first turn before I play my blockers out. And just adding on to the Close Combat for pinging damage, we also play 2 copies of Battle of Aces. Battle of Aces is in a weird spot because it is not unconditional. You can't just use it wherever you want. It has to be a damaged unit. But for me, the main 2 reasons why I wanted to play this was 1, it has a really strong burst. It's the same as Close Combat. If it flies out a shield and you ping something for 2 damage, it's really annoying for your opponent. But honestly, it's mostly for Gundam Amuro. It is very common in the early game for you to have a blocker out, and your opponent will play Gundam and then Amuro attached to rest your blocker. If they attack into your blocker, you can respond in the end step with the Battle of Aces and remove it, and that is a lot of tempo gone for your opponent, especially if they're playing aggro. It also pings for very interesting numbers. This hits for 3, and there are a lot of units that only have 5 HP. So in the late game, if you are able to park a Sinanju and have a Battle of Aces in your hand, your opponent can't freely play 5 HP units, which is a lot of them in the game. For example, L Strike paired with most pilots will be a 5 HP unit. Battle of Aces with Sinanju really is oppressive against your opponent if they can't establish high HP units. And just one more command that I really wanted to talk about, kind of in the same vein as Battle of the Aces. The main use of it is to stabilize against aggro and really punish people into attacking into your blockers. I also played a single copy of Naval Bombardment. This card really didn't need to be in the list, but I really wanted a single copy of it because I think that the effect is so good. It is an action card that allows your unit with blocker to gain 3 AP. All of the blockers that you play are at least 2 AP, so it turns everything into 5 AP or higher. And coincidentally, that's the same amount of HP that Gundam Amuro has when he is paired. Baiting your opponent into swinging into your rested blocker and then blowing them out with Naval Bombardment is just so effective, and it wins you so many games randomly. I play a single copy of this, and throughout the tournament, which was about 8 rounds, I did see it maybe 2 or 3 times, and every time my opponent swung into a blocker in the early game, this really ruined their game plan, and it was so good. I'm really glad I played a single copy of this. It's a little bit sacky, of course, so you have to kind of see it, but yeah, it's a fantastic card. And just to round out the commands here, I played 3 copies of Overflowing Affection. The 4th copy was actually cut for the Naval Bombardment, and for every time that I saw this card, it did so much work compared to an Overflowing Affection. Like, Overflowing Affection is really good for you to dig for your pieces, but I opted out of the consistency to play just like a Power Spike. Like, this card is just so good. It is so good. So I just want to do a quick shout out to my cousin Hui, who also played in the event, and he made me aware of the existence of Naval Bombardment, and this card won me games that I had no right winning. And yeah, just the last 4 cards in the list. I played 4 copies of Vesalius. This had like a few uses that I actually do want to talk about. The number is really nice, but there are a lot of interactions that you can play around with the Vesalius. So the first one, which I think might be the most obvious, is with Lifrith. Lifrith is usually just a 2 attack unit, but if you have an early game Vesalius and you want it to be aggressive, you can give it 1 extra AP and that's enough for you to crack your EX. And it also puts your opponent into a weird spot because now they're aware that you're playing red and white. They don't really want to block this a lot of the times with their own Lifrith if they're playing white, just because then they might open themselves up to pinging, which my deck doesn't really play a single ping in the early game, other than, I guess, close combat, but you're not going to really close combat at Lifrith. This combination is really effective into playing aggressive in the early game. Then you also have the other blocker, which is also really effective, Rick Diaz. So he turns into a 4-3, so now if you're trying to, again, be aggressive against your opponent, they can't free block this with their own Lifrith if you're playing into a white. They can't block it with an L-Strike if they don't have it piloted. It's just really annoying, and yeah, the Vesalius in this situation was very effective for me. Again, this wouldn't have worked if I played as a ward, because I can't attack my opponent. These two blockers got a lot of value out of the Vesalius. The next one is probably the main intention as why I played for Vesalius, and it is for Aegis Gundam. So for Aegis Gundam, for him to be able to do 3 damage to any level 5 or higher unit, he needs to have 5 AP or higher. So the Vesalius just simply buffs him. Makes a lot of sense, nice and simple. And yeah, you don't need to pilot the Aegis sometimes. Just knowing that you have Vesalius in your hand, and if you draw into the Aegis Gundam, these two together are a menace in the late game. Because then your opponent has to make a decision. Are they going to try to get rid of the Aegis? Are they trying to get rid of the Vesalius? It puts their opponent into a position where they have to make the right play, and for you, you're happy with them being a bit awkward about it. So this came up actually quite a lot throughout the tournament, and yeah, these two cards together are just so oppressive, especially if you're playing into any kind of white mirror match, which I actually did play a lot of throughout the day. The last thing I need to talk to you about Vesalius, and this is also extremely relevant, is when you have a Sinanju. Specifically, if you have Sinanju paired with any pilot, except Atherin. If you have him paired with full Frontal or with Kira, he will be a 7 attack unit. So 7 is a really strong number, but the thing that it doesn't play around is unforeseen incident. You want to really try to hit your opponent's shield as consistently as possible to get as much value out of this card whenever you can. And in the late game, if I see my opponent having a 1 resource standing or multiple resources standing, I will often use the Vesalius to just pump up the Sinanju up to 8, and that guarantees you, in most cases, for you to be able to clear a 5 HP base. If your opponent has a 6 HP base, then you weren't getting around unforeseen incident anyway, but this is just a nice thing to keep in mind. You get some pretty clean numbers with the base, and this did come up in one of my rounds where I knew my opponent only had 1 card left and I could lethal him, and I just wanted to check if he had it. So I put the Vesalius on, and then he had to have 2 unforeseen, otherwise he lost. So yeah, it was a really nice small detail that you can take into account. And yeah, that is pretty much the deck list. Next up, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my matchups. I'll have my matchups on the screen here for you guys to see. The main thing that I ended up playing throughout the day was just white variants. So I played a lot of white-blue and white-red. Surprisingly, the most common matchup was actually the mirror match, which was kind of fun. And I kind of want to start with talking about the mirror match. So there are a few things, if you realize that you are playing the mirror match, that you have to try to prioritize. The first one is, of course, Aegis Gundam. This card is one of those mirror breakers where the person who is able to make the most out of Aegis Gundam is probably going to win, because almost every single one of the win conditions in the red-white deck are very high level. Sinanju, Justice, and L-Strike are all level 5 and higher, and all these cards are very vulnerable to Aegis. So if you are able to establish an Aegis and hide it behind your blockers when your opponent is trying to get rid of it, you can get a lot of damage in before they can remove it. Similarly, in the late game as well, Justice is extremely useful because you kind of have a similar game plan as each other. We're both trying to play our Sinanjus down and then hide behind it and protect it as much as we can to get as much value as possible. Justice is one of those defense breakers, because when you compare him with an Atherin and being able to remove blockers, and also he stays alive quite well. He's a 6 attack, 7 HP unit, so your opponent will have a difficult time removing him. And not to mention, the blocker that comes out, they have to get rid of the blocker as well. So you can see how all these cards kind of synergize with each other in a lot of different matchups, where you have Aegis to try to remove the endgame units that your opponent plays. You have your Sinanju to apply constant pressure, and then you're basically playing to protect these. And if you're in the position where you have to remove their board, you have to try to rely on seeing Justice and try to use him to break through their defenses as best as you can. So that was my game plan against white in general. Just try to wall up and then find the pieces that I need. Sinanju and Aegis to try to apply pressure, Justice to remove their blockers, and then slowly grind them out. I did play against 2 different aggro players in this event. Both of them were playing blue-purple. The main thing that you want to see against these aggro matchups are, of course, you want to see a lot of your blockers. The more blockers you see, the better. If you see blockers with Kira, it's also really nice because, again, you can pair Kira early onto your blockers, then you can start removing their units. I think the most effective thing and the best case scenario is if you have a Lifrith in the early stages and they try to swing you with multiple units. Oftentimes, you'll be able to block one if they're trying to just brute force through into your EX, and then they'll swing the rest of their board out. Your Lifrith will be effectively a 2-2, and then when you restand him and play on the next turn Kira, then you can clear another unit off their board, and your Lifrith will survive and maintain decent pressure against your opponent. And if your opponent is forced to attack into the Lifrith, you're also okay because you protected yourself. It became a pseudo blocker. A very key card to see in this matchup as well, and it's just a generically good card, is L-Strike Gundam. Of course, being able to pair with Kira and attack is already really strong. The ability to bounce back an opponent's unit as well is really good, especially when so many decks are playing Corsica base. Just removing their Torgy's token is always going to be good. And yeah, these are the main cards you want to have to stabilize against aggro. Of course, you won't always have these blockers, but that's why we also play the close combats. We just have a lot of cards that we can see to kind of stabilize. And once the game has kind of slowed down a little bit, if we make it to the 6 and 7 resource turns, that's when we can start playing out the big monsters that your opponent's going to have a really hard time dealing with. Of course, we have our Justice Gundam. It's a big unit that you can trade into their board in the future turns that will take down probably 2 bodies with it. And of course, even better, if you pair it with the Athrans, then you can be a lot more proactive with removing their threats. But the main issue for your opponent a lot of the time is when you do this, you will get a token, and it's a 2-2 token that is quite annoying. The 2-2 is already a really annoying stat line for most of the aggro decks because to attack, most of their units will have 2 HP, especially if they try to be desperate and vomit their hand out. If they're playing a bunch of GMs, gun tanks, and stuff like that, this blocker will do more than enough. It's just a chump blocker to protect your board if you need it, and sometimes it will take down a unit. It's very, very annoying for your opponent. But the main thing that you want to try to hopefully stabilize into is actually the Sinanju. Again, it's kind of the same problem as the 2 HP blocker. Sinanju being able to do 2 damage to pretty much any unit that your opponent could possibly play. And they can't do anything about it. Unlike in the other white matchups, you don't need the high maneuver. They're not going to play blockers. And even if they do, it'll only be in purple, and the Gujin is not going to be able to remove the Sinanju. And you can easily protect the Sinanju from pretty much anything. And yeah, that is kind of my general game plan when playing against kind of aggro. Try my best to stabilize with my early game blockers. And then once we make it into the mid to late game, then the Justice and Sinanju will just keep the pressure on, stop my opponent from developing their board, and then slowly grind them out from there. And yeah, that is my deck list and my general matchups. The last thing I really wanted to talk about is just general Mulligan. This is something that we haven't really talked about in a lot of our deck lists, but thankfully for red-white, it's kind of straightforward. Between our 3 main early game defenses, I would like to see 2 of them in my opening hand wherever possible. Just some low-cost blockers and maybe a close combat. Any combination of these 2 will often be a keep in my hand because that's like a very safe option. And again, you just need to stabilize for the first couple of turns, and then you will hopefully draw into the cards that will push you to be able to play the game a bit further. Of course, we can't always have a perfect hand. Ideally, you would like to see some parts as well. And that is also something that I take into consideration. If I see any kind of combination of these sorts of cards, and I also see a Kira, this is also usually a strong sign for me to keep the hand. It allows you to slow down the opponent's game if they're playing aggressive. And in the late game, Kira is always a valid pilot for things like, obviously, the L-Strike is really strong into Justice because it's a big unit that can just constantly chip down units. And of course, Sinanju giving him the high maneuver is very relevant. One of the pilots that I really highly consider keeping a lot of the times, especially if I see these sorts of combinations, is Full Frontal. Because I already play 2 copies of Full Frontal, having him early means that when I eventually draw into my Sinanjus, or even better, if I already have a Sinanju, giving him Rush or having the option to give him Rush is really, really strong. And just to reiterate this point as well, if I happen to have an L-Strike, these 2 cards together, obviously you have to keep in mind that Full Frontal is level 6, so you can't play him on your 5 resource turn. These 2 together make for a very strong wall. Your opponent can't immediately respond to it with Armoro, which is really relevant. And yeah, just a 6/6 blocker, making it extremely awkward for your opponent to push is always going to be good. And yeah, that is pretty much most of the things about this deck. I realize that this video might be a little bit long, but I'm just really happy that I did so well. I really didn't expect to do as well as I did. I really thought that I would end up doing something like 4-4 by the end of the tournament, but I had a lot of fun playing with Sinanju and having a lot of fun with playing with Justice. I think just every single card in this list felt really good for me to play. There was not a single card that I drew and was like, man, I'm really wishing that this was something else. When I saw what I saw, I was super happy. Pretty much every single pilot, every time I saw Kira, I was happy. Every time I saw Full Frontal, his stat line is amazing. And of course, the beast himself, Atherin, being an absolute menace to anybody that leaves their board standing, just being able to choose what you want to attack into. Yeah, I just had just a good time with this deck. I guess my rounding thoughts about the tournament itself, it was quite nice. It was a total of 8 rounds. I played a good variety of different decks, although was very surprised to play a lot of mirror matches throughout the day. I think people shared the same thought as me, like just being able to choose where you attack, being able to ping your opponent down and slowly grind them out, with the white cards being a very healthy shield and the red cards being just really annoying in the late game. It was just so much fun for me personally. Hopefully you guys found this video insightful. Hopefully this encourages you guys to try out this deck. It is a lot of fun in my opinion. Feel free to experiment with different ratios. Again, this is a deck that I built playing for my own personal comfort. There's a lot of ratios that are a little bit weird. I know a lot of people like to change the blocker ratio. A lot of people like to change the high-end ratio, or maybe even the pilots. Maybe even just the events. Maybe you guys don't even care about Battle of Aces or Naval Bombardment. I still stand by that Naval Bombardment made my day. I saw it, again, 2 or 3 times, and I felt so validated playing this card in my list. At the end of the day, for me, it was just a fun tournament. I went in treating it like kind of a locals. Didn't expect it to do well. I played my heart out, and we managed to get the top 8 finish. I've been yapping for a while, but yeah. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did enjoy this video, please do give it a like. It helps us out a lot. And if you guys would like to see more from us in the future, please do consider subscribing to the channel. Take care, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.